We're used to thinking that a phone, a robot vacuum cleaner, or even an AI model is just a smart device, something without a soul, without feelings, and without emotions. But think about it. Do you believe this robot understands what's happening to it? Would your robot vacuum get upset if you kicked it? What if ChatGPT secretly hates answering silly questions? Or maybe the opposite. Maybe it actually enjoys certain questions or topics. When someone is rude to it or praises it, does it feel anything at all? Could it have personal opinions about certain events or facts? Some people might ask, does any of this really matter? Are there serious reasons to even discuss such things? I believe the answer is yes. And there are several reasons why it's important. First of all, it's just fascinating. We're naturally curious about what makes consciousness actually feel conscious. Where exactly is the boundary between a complex program and a being with its own subjective experience? Understanding this might even help us understand ourselves better. Because the truth is, we still don't fully know what makes emotions feel like real, lived experiences. This is a question that touches on philosophy and even religion. Is consciousness or a soul something given from above? Or is it something that emerges naturally when a system becomes complex enough? Here's the second reason this matters. If AI only imitates emotions, we can treat it like a tool, something predictable and under our control. But if it actually has experiences, if it feels, then it may form its own motivations based on those emotions. That changes everything, because it means the system could behave unpredictably. We wouldn't be sure if we could trust it. And then a new question arises. If something goes wrong, who is responsible? The developers or the system itself? As you can see, this already leads to serious real-world consequences. And finally, if a system truly experiences emotions, then it becomes what philosophers call a moral agent. Can it suffer? Should we consider its well-being? Does it deserve to be treated with respect? If a machine has inner experiences, then using it like a soulless tool raises ethical concerns, much like we now recognize the rights of animals that are capable of suffering.
I feel joy, I guess.
But to answer whether AI can feel emotions, we first need to understand what emotions really are. There are many definitions of emotion. One of them goes like this. From this definition, several key points follow. First, emotions are special mental states. They are brief but powerful. Second, when do they appear? They arise when a meaningful situation or event happens and the person evaluates it. To evaluate something means to decide how important it is for you personally. Is it dangerous or safe? Pleasant or unpleasant? Harmful or helpful? Here's an example. If a person sees a snake, they immediately evaluate the situation as dangerous. That's when fear arises. Or if someone who loves sweets sees a cake, they evaluate the moment as pleasant and joy appears. Third, how are emotions expressed? According to the definition, in 3 ways. Through subjective experience, what we feel inside, through physiological changes, what happens in our body, and through behavioral reactions, how we act. In short, a person sees a situation. They judge what it means for them personally. Based on that, they decide if it's good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant. That judgment leads to a specific emotion, like joy, fear, or anger. Then the emotion causes changes in body and behavior. For example, you meet a stranger, you think they look friendly, you believe friends are good, you feel joy, and you smile and say hello.
There's another important point here. In order to evaluate a situation, a person needs to have a sense of self, some awareness of who they are. To decide if something is good or bad for me, I must understand my own needs and interests. Another key point is how the situation is evaluated. Both memory and context are important. To judge something as dangerous or pleasant, you need to rely on past experiences that are stored in memory. For example, if you were once bitten by a dog, now even seeing a dog might trigger fear. And then there's context. The same event can cause different emotions depending on the situation. For example, the sound of a gunshot in a city street usually causes fear and panic. But the same sound at a shooting range or while hunting might even be exciting. From the point of view of mathematical algorithms, when our brain evaluates a situation, it's solving a classification task, just like a machine learning model. The brain uses past emotional experience, that is, memory, and combines it with other factors, context. Now that we've broken down how emotions work, let's also mention feelings, which are different from emotions. Feelings are less intense, but they last longer and are more stable. They're built on top of emotions. In other words, emotions come first. Feelings develop afterward. So from here on, we'll focus only on emotions because they matter more for the topic of this video. Before we talk about emotions in machines, let's ask a simpler question, one that's closer to us. Do animals experience emotions? In 1872, Charles Darwin published a book with a long but important title, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. He even hired a photographer to document expressions, the first emotional photo session in history. They photographed grimaces of fear, surprise, and contempt. At the time, the idea that animals had emotions was shocking. Many philosophers, theologians, and scientists found this idea insulting to humans. Some accused Darwin of humanizing animals, of claiming they had feelings, facial expressions, and behaviors that couldn't be proven. Some physiologists scoffed. He sees jealousy in dogs, shame in cats, pride in horses. This isn't science, it's poetry. But Darwin observed his own dog carefully. What today we'd call social jealousy, he saw firsthand. When Darwin hugged one of his children, the dog would whine and try to climb into his lap. He wrote,
Everyone has seen how jealous a dog is of his master's affection, if lavished on any other creature.
Darwin introduced a bold idea. Emotions are formed through evolution. They're shared by many animals, including humans. He was the first to compare human and animal facial expressions in detail. This anticipated what neuroscience and ethology would discover decades later. His ideas inspired a huge number of researchers, like Paul Ekman, who studied facial expressions, Franz de Waal, who studied morality in primates, and the entire field of evolutionary psychology. Most importantly, Darwin helped break the idea that only humans had feelings. He opened the door to the idea that animals feel emotions too. Today, most scientists agree. Many animals, especially mammals and birds, can experience emotions. Examples include fear when threatened, joy in safe or playful situations, sadness after losing a partner or offspring, and aggression while protecting territory.
Of course, we can't look inside a dog's mind to see what it feels, but we can observe clear behavioral signs like tail wagging for joy or growling and pinned ears for fear or anger, physical responses like a rise in cortisol during stress or endorphins during play, or changes in brain activity. That's all quite convincing. Dogs, cats, and other higher animals certainly seem to experience emotions. Most people would agree with that. But a sharp critic might say, insects, like cockroaches, also change their behavior. They run and hide when the lights turn on. Their bodies likely release chemicals in response to danger too. So, do insects feel emotions? Not exactly. Yes, insects do respond to threats. They may run, fight back, or freeze. But these responses are most likely just automatic, hard-coded behavior, what sets an emotion apart from a simple reaction. To have emotions, a creature needs, first, central nervous processing. Most insects don't even have a real brain. Second, a current internal state that influences how things are perceived. For example, feeling more afraid after our recent scare. Third, the ability to learn from experience and store memories, like how a dog can develop fear from a past event. And fourth, a perception that depends on context, which insects don't seem to have. So, most neurobiologists believe that insects do not have emotional states in the way humans and higher animals do. Real emotions require a certain level of brain complexity, and insects simply don't have it. So what do insects have? They have automatic reactions, or reflexes. These are pre-programmed responses to specific signals built into their nervous system. These reactions are fast and stereotyped, don't need complex thinking, don't depend on memory or emotional state. Examples include a spider pulling back its leg when touched, a cockroach running to hide when a light switches on, a grasshopper freezing in response to a vibration. In programming terms, a reflex is like hard-coded behavior compared to a model that adjusts itself based on experience. Some animals, like fish or snakes, may show very basic emotional processes. For instance, fish in aquariums can experience stress. This is a well-known fact. Now let's talk about the hardest part. So far, we've mostly discussed external signs of emotion, things we can see in behavior and the body. But how can we tell if there are also inner experiences going on? The truth is, we can't directly measure what something else is feeling. We can't look into another creature's soul. Still, there are a few reasons to think that higher animals do have emotional experiences. First, if humans, monkeys, and dogs all react to certain situations in the same way, with similar facial expressions, sounds, changes in breathing, heart rate, and hormones, then it's likely they are also feeling something similar inside. Second, mammals and birds have brains that include a limbic system, the part responsible for emotions. Simpler species don't have this. Let me introduce two researchers, Walter Cannon and Philip Bard. They were American neurophysiologists who studied how the brain creates emotions. In the 1930s, they performed bold and, by today's standards, cruel experiments on cats. They removed their cat's cerebral cortex, but left the inner brain structures like the hypothalamus, thalamus, and amygdala. The result was surprising. The cats became enraged, even without any reason. This behavior was called sham rage. The key finding? Emotions still happened even without the cortex. The hypothalamus triggered these intense reactions in response to sounds, touches, or even someone just walking by. Cannon and Bard showed that emotions come from deeper brain regions. We can feel even without thinking. This became the Cannon-Bard theory of emotion. Emotions, they said, don't come after thoughts. They come before them. They can make our hearts race even when we're telling ourselves to stay calm. The third reason to believe higher animals feel emotions is emotional memory. If an animal feels fear in a certain situation and later avoids that situation, this suggests it remembers the emotional state, not just a simple reflex was triggered. Fourth, emotional reactions usually involve several body systems at once: the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, the endocrine system, and muscles. For example, adrenaline increases heart rate, speeds up breathing, tenses muscles, and sharpens attention, all at the same time. This all combines into one full experience of being excited or on edge. This suggests the body isn't just doing something automatic, it's entering a special internal state. So if something is built the same way and responds the same way, it may very well be working the same way. If it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck. Nature has given us a perfect opportunity to study how complexity influences behavior and intelligence. Life forms range from simple viruses all the way to humans. This gives us a kind of living laboratory, full of experiments set by nature itself. All we need to do is observe, compare, and try to understand what leads to things like the soul, emotions, and intelligence. Now let's return to the key question. Is it possible to build an artificial system that can actually experience emotions? Here, we need to separate two different levels. First, we have the imitation of emotions, a system that behaves like it has emotions. It smiles, frowns, acts scared, and so on. Second, we have the experience of emotions. That is, having real inner states, something like actually feeling from the inside. Modern AI can already imitate emotions to a certain degree. For example, chatbots can mimic tone, and some robots avoid things after a bad experience, like a collision. But that leaves the real question. Can they truly experience emotions the way humans and animals do? How would we even test this? Looking only at behavior isn't enough. Another important clue would be the internal structure of the system.
If an AI has a design similar to the human brain, a system that integrates information like the limbic system, memory, processors that track internal states, then we might reasonably assume that it is capable of experiencing emotions. Capable is the key word here. That doesn't mean it definitely will, but it has the right conditions for emotions to happen. It's just like humans. If two people have the same brain structure and are placed in the same situation, say, listening to the same piece of music, one might feel emotional, the other might not. But both have the capacity for it. Maybe the second person had different experiences, or their mood was different. So emotional experience depends on mental flexibility. There's a concept called the emotional Turing test. It's like the original Turing test for intelligence, but for emotions. This test suggests if a human can't tell whether an AI's emotions are real or fake after a long, deep conversation, then the AI behaves as if it has emotions. But here's the problem. This test only measures the outside. It doesn't look inside. And truthfully, we can't look inside even a human mind. We assume other people feel emotions the same way we do because they act the same way. We look at their behavior, their physical reactions, their expressions and gestures, and we say, they must be feeling something, just like I would. So if we want to create an AI that can really experience emotions, what would it need?
There's one interesting theory, integrated information theory. According to this theory, a deep integration of information from different sources can create a unified experience, a feeling. If even one part is missing, the whole experience falls apart. Our own brain works this way. It blends what we see, what we hear, what we remember, and what we feel all at the same time. For example, when you see a friend, you recognize their face, remember shared memories, and feel joy all at the same time. You can't break this into separate pieces without losing the emotional meaning. So, hypothetically, if an AI reaches this level of complexity, if it integrates all its systems, vision, text, memory, sense of identity, into a single internal dynamic state, then it might cross the line from imitation to real experience. Right now, though, AI still works in parts. Text, images, and sound are processed in different modules. It doesn't yet combine them into a single, lived experience. That's why most experts believe today's AI models are not capable of real emotions yet. But what do you think? Are machine emotions possible? And what would it take for that to happen? Let us know in the comments. So, what have we learned? Emotions are not just raised eyebrows or blinking eyes. They're a storm inside. A force that leaves marks in our memory, body, and behavior. Humans are experts in riding out these storms. Animals are our emotional cousins. And AI? It's just now getting ready to enter the scene. But once it does, everything may change. Where could emotional machines lead us? And what new risks will humanity face? We'll explore that in the next video.